and welcome to this webinar. Thank you so much for registering and for signing up. I have got Dominik Schreyer with me from WHU in Germany, who has got a super interesting remit and will tell us very soon about his work and take us into the fascinating world of sports economics and how technology can accelerate that space. So firstly, a warm welcome. And before I hand over to Dominik, a bit about myself. My name is Melanie Müller. I'm an AI consultant, coach, and instructor. I'm also the Chief AI Officer of Gen Futures Lab. You might have seen some of my content. But let's dive straight in. Dominik, can you tell us a bit more about what you do, who you are, and maybe share an interesting fact about yourself?
So first of all, thanks for having me, Melanie. That's actually my first LinkedIn Live, so I'm really curious to see how it goes. It's exciting. I'm Dominik, as you've said. I'm a professor of sports economics at WHU, which is a well-known, highly entrepreneurial European business school, and there I'm also the co-director of the Center for Sports and Management. And if you're asking about an interesting or surprising fact, well, if you follow my work on LinkedIn or like elsewhere, you'll see that, as a sports economist, I always advise clubs to reduce season ticket sales, and I preach how bad no-shows are. But guess what? I also have a season ticket, and I'm also an occasional no-show myself. Like, in my defense, I try not to. I try to redistribute my tickets, but life happens, right? So yeah, that's it. Now it's out. I'm a no-show too.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Before we dive into the discussion, just a bit of housekeeping for everyone. If you do have any questions, please post them into the comments on LinkedIn. There's a bit of a delay, so start posting your questions now so we can make sure that we can get them covered and I can ask your questions to Dominik. So firstly, tell us a bit about what you are doing, a bit more about what you are doing at the WHU. And especially, I'm really interested in your work around stadium economics, future studies. I got the opportunity myself to participate in a study. So yeah, what does that entail? And what's your passion? What excites you?
Yeah, so at the center, at the CSM, what we do is effectively we help sports business leaders prepare for a future where tech savviness is critical to their success, right? So we educate the next generation of sport business leaders in the bachelor's program, in the master's program, but also in executive education, of course. We conduct research that matters, like not only for my peers in academia, but also to sports business practitioners, ideally. And to have some impact on the practice, we translate this research into actionable insights. For example, by posting on LinkedIn or by doing consulting projects. And you already teased that. Like, what we do research-wise is we bring together experts to share their perspectives on potential future developments, right? Because neither I nor anyone at the center has some kind of magic crystal ball, right? Instead, we develop projections, and our experts then assess whether these projections are likely to occur, whether they are desirable, and like in case they do materialize, how impactful they might be. And they also explain what brings them to their conclusions. So we have like plenty of input from the field to the field, so to say. So, for example, last year we published a Delphi study on the future of women's football in Germany, and next week, and I think I can tease this here, we'll be releasing a new study on the future of German elite sports. So this will be available Thursday next week, hopefully. You never know, but that's the plan. Nobody can really predict the future, right? But at least that's the plan. And additionally, that's a study that you referred to. We're also preparing to release a study on the effects of artificial intelligence, AI, on sports sponsorship. And this will be due, like, I think in later this year, so mid of the year. So that's a lot of input from the practice, and these insights naturally feed back into our work with clubs and thought leaders in pro sports. So right now, for example, we run what we call like future workshops. For example, with Borussia Dortmund, and there naturally the stadium, if you talk about sports, right, the stadium plays a crucial role, and this is also where my heart is, because most of my research focuses on aspects of stadium economics, especially like consumer behavior topics, such as, I teased it in the introduction, no-show behavior. And I think this brings us directly to today's discussion, right? The role of spectators in time of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about spectators, obviously. But before we dive into that, really curious about what you touched on with regards to the study on AI's impact on sports sponsorship. So because obviously recently in the news I've seen how agencies that use sports data at scale to enhance sponsorship are now reintroducing AI, such as Relometrics, for example, was the recent news, and they're using some of NVIDIA's capabilities. So are you allowed to tell us a bit more about that?
Well, I don't want to be a party pooper here, but I am not. I think like when maybe more generally, right? If you think about the future, then people tend to overestimate what is possible now and to underestimate what will happen in the future, right? And I think if you think about like things like the hype cycle and how technology typically diffuses in a market, it's unlikely that things change very drastically in the rather soon future, right? But you need to prepare for that, right? You need to invest today to be future ready, as I've said. But I can't share anything on this study at the moment. I'm sorry for that.
Okay, I think we are all now really excited and waiting for that study to come out. So please do make sure you share the link once it's out.
Yeah, of course.
But that leads us to our actual next question. So, which role do spectators play in the stadium ecosystem? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So, like, how much time do we have? That's a
Another 20 minutes
we
ish.
could talk about this for hours, right? So, I think what's important, and also if we like later talk about the role of AI in like changing the spectator's role, what's important is that throughout the history, the role of spectators in sports has, well, I'd say, continually evolved, right? So the role has changed over time. And if you like in the 19th century, like in the earliest days, people, they simply gathered around the fields to watch others compete. They were actually spectating, right? But as more and more of their leisure time was devoted to what we call today like the people's game, some saw a business opportunity here, there, right? So offering spectators more comfort, perhaps like we're coming from the UK, right? So perhaps even a roof over their heads for the bad weather, and they wanted to have like exchange that for a fee. And to charge these fees, they needed stadiums, which effectively introduced an access barrier, right? So with the emergence of stadiums, attendance became more structured and access became restricted, turning some fans into paying customers while excluding others, right? So the stadium is actually at the heart of commercialization. And over time, these paying spectators became crucial to club finances. So that's the first role, I'd say, right? There was a time when spectators were the primary revenue source for sports organizations. And if you think about clubs, like iconic clubs with early sporting success, it's often those with relatively strong seat supply, so large capacity, right? If you think about Real Madrid, for instance, or in Germany, clubs like Nuremberg or later Bayern Munich, they had a competitive advantage because their stadium was so big. However, like today, this has changed a bit, and matchday revenue, which includes ticketing, only accounts for around 15% of club income if you exclude transfer fees. So while it's still significant, it's no longer the dominant financial pillar. However, so other revenue streams like media income and commercial revenue, this has become more important. And here the spectators play a crucial role too, which is like the second important role, I'd say. So through their chanting, booing, singing, even by simply wearing their team shirts or colors, right? They have become an essential part of the product. And this is not a popular way to frame it, right? But this product, including all those fans in the stands, that is then distributed and consumed by others. Most notably, if you think like audiences watching from home or mobile, or in the future through VR, right? I mean, we all remember how different it felt to watch football or any sport during the pandemic. This was crazy, and clubs desperately tried to compensate for the absence of those fans. Like, what did we see? Like, they tried to recreate the atmosphere with like cardboard cutouts, right? This is like crazy. Artificial crowd noises and even digital fans. This looked like in FIFA 96 or something like this. But they tried everything so much to create the atmosphere that fans naturally effectively provide, right? And this atmosphere is not just for like those in the stands to create that, to consume that product in the stands, but it also creates a stage that is crucial for sponsors. So we're now back at the sponsoring topic for a second. And this stage allows brands to engage with audiences. It's very emotional in a way that an empty stadium or any other business simply cannot, right? But I want to talk today about a different role, like the third major role, I'd say, and that's support, right? This is like at the core of what spectators also like consider their role, right? It's core support. After all, those in the stands are called like historically, like the 12th man for a reason, and maybe the 12th women if we would name it today. So should we talk about that a bit?
Yes, let's talk about that a bit more. The sort of like support they provide. And then also, I'm really curious to find out more about how is technology actually going to help change the game? And maybe is technology able to augment the role of the spectator, get them closer to the action? So I absolutely loved how you mentioned during the pandemic, there wasn't this immediate human connection. We couldn't go to stadiums and everything, and it was just not the same. But is there maybe a role for technology in a different way?
Yeah, so plenty of questions. Let's start at the beginning, right? So
Let's do that.
if we talk about crowd support in the stadium, we are actually talking about home advantage, and or like the role of crowds in home advantage. And what's really interesting is that like everyone, like almost everyone, seems to agree that home advantage emerging from the crowds is a thing, right? Players believe it. Head coaches complain if support is weak. They are really happy if support is strong. They scapegoat fans if they're not loud enough sometimes. And before important matches, the management typically addresses the public and say, well, we ask for your support. It's such an important match. Please support it. So apparently it is a thing. And if we look at like academic research, and there's plenty of them, then I have a couple of remarks, right? And the first one is like home advantage has many potential routes, right? It's not just about spectators. It's also about the impact of travel, the athletes' familiarity with local conditions. Yeah, so we're talking about routines, climate or climatic differences, altitude variations, time zone shifts. This will be really important if we like think about the next World Cup, which is in the US, right, with different time zones, for example. So it's not just about the core support, but still, because this is so prominent, I think it's important to dive a bit deeper into that. And if we focus on spectators, then theoretically there are two ways that they can, or that people think they affect the match outcome. So first, crowd can impact the athletes, right, through collective chants and cheers of varying intensity. They're loud, they're not so loud, they're angry, they're happy, they're supporting. And for the athletes they support, positive chants could, that's the theory, ideally have a motivating effect, right? So potentially enhancing their performance. Conversely, if you boo or whistle, this may reduce like team performance or athletes' performance. Second, and I think this is the more interesting part, a similar effect applies to the referees, right? Those officiating the match, and they like consciously or unconsciously, perhaps unconsciously, might be influenced to favor home athletes, the home team, right? This is like the idea of home advantage. But that's the theory, right? Should we dive into the empirics? Yeah. So I think what's interesting here is like two things. The first thing is home advantage is still a thing. However, it's decreasing. So for tens of years now, slightly but surely, home advantage decreases in virtually all football leagues. And there are various, or also sports, right? Not we are often focused on football, but generally. And there are various explanations for this trend, right? And if you look into the literature, the one thing is like the increasing professionalization of refereeing, right? So they're better referees, they're more focused, more education on that. But in other sports, also the introduction of technological aids, right? If you think about the video assistant referee, hawk eye, to like have or goal line technology, there's so much tech in there that the chance to actually make human biases are reduced, right? And another, maybe because I find it perfect, like interesting, another explanation can be found in the Matthew effect. And I'm not sure how well you know the Bible, but this effect describes the phenomenon of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this concept is highly applicable to the financial dynamics between wealthy and like not so wealthy clubs, because clubs that generate higher revenues, and these revenues are like excessively in the Champions League, for example, they can reinvest these earnings to strengthen their dominance in the league, right? So which then becomes a problem in the domestic competition. And as a result, they gain advantages and competitive advantages. So they don't have to rely on their own stadium, but in away matches, this imbalance in competitiveness, because there's so much money, for example, in a squad like Manchester United, Barcelona, Real, Bayern Munich, you name it, that this diminishes the potential home advantage of the opponents. So, and if you reflect on that a bit, it's hardly surprising that the actual influence of spectators in team sports, which is such an important role, right?
Yeah.
It is contrary to popular belief, it's very, very limited. So this is typically overestimated. And well, we did a paper a few years, or I did a paper a few years back, one of the first on the effect of COVID on home advantage with colleagues from the UK, great colleagues, including Carl Singleton, James Reed. And by now there are hundreds of papers, right? And we closely examined this first COVID season, because half of the season there were spectators, and the other half season there were ghost games, right? Empty stands, right? So 2019, 2020, we covered 70 countries, 23 leagues, 1,500 matches. And what we found, and this is like crazy, what we found is that on average, there are differences between leagues, right? But on average, the absence of spectators translated in the home team receiving more yellow cards, while the away team received fewer yellow cards. This means the difference, which typically favors the home team, is somewhat reduced if spectators are absent. So in other words, home advantage is like reduced if fans are not in the stands. However, the effect is super, super modest. It amounts to 0.2 or 1/5 of a yellow card. That's the effect that's left from spectators. So
Wow.
put differently, spectators cause the away team to receive an extra yellow card in every fifth game. And similar effects can be found in like other matches, before the ghost games, after ghost games. It's a rather robust finding. And this has to do with technology, right? With the video assistant referee that proves like almost all the decisions in professional football, except for yellow cards. So that's the reason why we find the effect there. But we couldn't find a motivating effect. They don't run faster. They don't score more goals. This is all myths.
And just to say thank you so much for joining this webinar. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn or scan this QR code to go to my stand store to find out a bit more about what I'm doing. And thank you so much for joining.